It's been a long time since I've made a video, and well, there is a reason for that. I've been thinking about a lot of things, and in particular, the entire um, social media and its consequences, which necessarily includes YouTube, all of Google by by definition, our search engines, and everything we do in our interconnected world. I am seriously beginning to question whether this is a beneficial development. Now, I'm I'm still on the internet. I haven't gone dark. I'm on the computer virtually every day. I use search engines every day. You know, I've tried to get away from Google, but that's not entirely possible. Um, Bing isn't that much better, and GoDuck, whatever that search engine is the only other competitor, and it simply doesn't. There isn't, it just is. It's in its infancy. Let's put it this way. I want to recommend to everybody that is involved, like most Americans are, okay, and most everybody in Europe, and in even most of Asia. I want to recommend a book, or rather two books, to you. And I know hardly anybody ever reads anymore, but this is part of the problem on the internet, is because we're we're essentially getting a lot of times through this instant communication medium is sound bites. And perhaps, we're able to read articles, we're able to, look up information, and a lot of it is just overwhelming information. It requires an almost instant response, 24/7. The room for any kind of contemplation here is very fastly vanishing from the spectrum. And I think this is where the danger lies in this medium, because it almost elicits and requires instantaneous responses and instantaneous desires on part of the maker of videos and the part of the and the recipient. So I do want to recommend an author, which ironically, of course, I found through YouTube, and his name is Evgeny Morozov, and he is a critic, a media critic, essentially an intellectual who grew up in Belarus, and he was basically an internet fanatic. He was totally plugged in, and it had everything to do with democratization, of the commons. Since he lived in Belarus, that's understandable, because the media and press there isn't too free. And so he became intimately involved in all of this. And eventually he moved to the United States. But before he did this, he found out that that this impact that the social media had in Belarus were actually being was actually being used against activists, political activists. And now, of course, with the revelations through Snowden and other sources, um, it makes sense that people should pay attention to this, because this is nothing new. This kind of utopia that has set in, particularly in Western societies, that somehow, social media is going to save the world, and technology overall, and anything coming out of Silicon Valley is going to make the world a better place is not necessarily true. There are downfalls, and there are things we should consider before we become, as a society as a whole, too infatuated with every new invention coming out of Palo Alto or other places in Silicon Valley. Because if you think about it, these entities have a financial interest in succeeding, and this financial interest doesn't necessarily translate to the common good. Now, if you've paid any attention as to how Facebook got started with Zuckerman and Zuckerberg, and you know, how this guy basically, you know, views it as a joke. I mean, he thinks people on Facebook are stupid, and I agree. It's like, why would you want to put everything about yourself out there in the first place? It's just, do you think Mark Zuckerberg does this? Do you think he broadcasts his entire personal life to the world? No, he doesn't. But he's making a lot of money off of it. That's why, well, basically, I mean, that's basically why I never joined Facebook in the first place, because, I mean, I saw it as the ruse that it was, basically. And the same thing goes for tweets and Twitter. I mean, how much more pathetic can it get when you could broadcast, you know, in 140 characters every single thought or rumor that you happen to think about, and just simply broadcast it to the world, you know. And the sad part is that even news organizations are taking part in all this, in this entire rumor mill. It doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, you could wait 14 hours or 3 months, and then everything is dispelled. It wasn't even true. It was just a rumor. And quite frankly, I would never pay attention to any medium like this. I find it absolutely laughable that people, especially young people, are falling for this. You know, essentially, you're being used as an advertising billboard, essentially. So anyway, to get back to the reason I made this video, I do want to recommend, because this is a very serious issue, I do want to recommend that everybody spend some time to at least pay attention to this author, Evgeny Morozov, and one of the first influential books or critical books of the technology, of this technology utopia, which is constantly being pushed on TED and so on. His first influential book was The Net Delusion. Okay, the net delusion. Can you see this? So there you go. The Net Delusion. Another good book that he wrote, and I have no connection to this author. I've never met the guy. You know, I just happen to think that he is a very bright person, a very critical thinker, and that more people should be paying attention to what he has to say. The next book he wrote is To Save Everything, Click Here. What this book deals with, more than his first book, The Net Delusion. The Net Delusion dealt with, you know, this sort of imagined safety net where social activists or political activists seem to think that you can change the world simply by, you know, online activities, or in conjunction with that, how these online activities can then be used in order to subvert actual events on the ground. You know, hence everything that happened in the revolution in Egypt, which was basically converted into something very different from its original intentions. So this other book, To Save Everything and Click Here, is a book about how our entire thinking process is being changed via the technology that we're using. In other words, we're not only being trained as consumers, and I mean to the max consumers, for every little thing. It's that everything else, every other activity is essentially being left by the wayside. And so this interconnectedness and this ease of pushing buttons and you know, granted, if I had a GPS in my car, I would probably use it, you know. On the other hand, I probably would not agree to its surveillance capabilities in the long term, you know. In the short term, getting me from place A to B, not a problem. But once that information is stored long term, let's say longer than, as far as GPS is concerned, my own personal car, you know, if I had one in it, there's no reason for that to be stored for more than a month. And if you're too lazy to, you know, punch in an address the next time you go to the same place, I mean, how sad is that? And how lazy can you get? So this thesis that Morozov puts out there is that our social interactions are being changed deliberately by Silicon Valley and, you know, all the technology culture out there, but not necessarily for the better, because some things perhaps shouldn't even need to be changed. Now you can argue, as he does in his book, that it's a good thing, you know, to spurn people on in order to recycle, in order to, you know, put your trash in certain bins, in order to exercise more. But it becomes a very different story when your every move, and this could very well happen in the near future through smart technology, your smartphone and other devices, that everything you do is essentially being recorded. And once it is recorded and stored, it is then somehow analyzed in, you know, into some sort of paradigm, which tells you, the user of that technology, that you're gonna gain some points. You're gonna get you know, little Amazon points, and you're gonna get $1 here, offer there if you do this and that. But the dark side of that whole picture, of course, is that it is the ultimate control mechanism if it goes into the wrong hands. Because once your, you know, insurance company finds out that you're not exactly living a perfect lifestyle, in other words, oh well, you didn't exercise 3 days of the week when you should have, or that you didn't follow directions in terms of getting your 8 hours of sleep like you should have, or that you haven't read the right literature as recommended by the net to be psychologically balanced, well then somebody eventually will use that against you monetarily, or at least that potential exists. I mean, in my mind, this is the total evisceration of civil liberties. No entity, regardless of whether it's the government or some private corporation, should have any involvement in storing my personal information into perpetuity in order to conduct some sort of social experiment whose results are not even in. And the results that are coming in are basically nothing more than an advanced consumer culture. And when you take into account that we probably should be scaling back on all this, due to the fact that our resources on this planet are rather limited, then it becomes a completely different picture. So I do want people to think about this. It's probably the only thing useful I could do today, is urge people to at least watch the guy's videos, He does have he does have an accent. So if you can't get beyond that, you know, beyond people having accents when they speak, and he's perfectly understandable. Um, but if you can't get beyond that, then then you already have a problem in the globalized world, because you're going to be talking to all kinds of people with all kinds of different accents uh, in this world, in this globalized world. Now, the only question becomes is, you know, are we just going to speak amongst themselves as Americans or Europeans, or are we going to, you know, take other voices into account, which may be just as important as ours, if not more so? So that's my little video for tonight, and so I'll leave a couple of links down below so that you can check out this guy's videos. I'll try to find the shortest videos, but what he has to say is not about simple answers. So I want to caution you. You know, I want people to think perhaps in a different direction than what we're going, and which is, you know, so easily accepted now. Good night.